Hi everyone, this is Ethann Fox from Awake And Empowered Radio. I'd like to welcome you all today to this really incredible interview that we're doing with Lloyd Mear. And I'm going to let Lloyd really talk about what it is that he does, since he can speak to that a little bit better than I can. But Lloyd will be one of the presenters at our Awake And Empowered Expo, October 11th through 13th, 2013. So definitely attend that if you can. He's doing some really breakthrough work, and I don't say that about just anybody. In fact, a lot of members of our core Expo staff have jumped on board with learning from him and so on, so that says a lot about his work. So this is an interview you really want to pay attention to. Lloyd, I'd like to start with you. Maybe if you can give us a little bit of an overview of what it is that you are doing, and because obviously our viewers are not going to be familiar with your work, and maybe give us a little overview of what the principles are and what it is that you do.
Very well. First of all, I'm not a medical person at all. I have never received any medical instruction, so it's all basically been done through my ability to dowse, if you like. And dowsing is a form of identifying many different things. I have sort of taken it from identifying where gold and metals are in the ground and onward into identifying conditions in health. And I do it primarily through identifying the energy of what it should be to what it may be. And it's a matter then of giving the mathematics that will set up the frequency to bring it into normalcy. I'm perhaps a little ahead of myself here, but let me go back and reflect on just what we are. We are primarily a ball of energy. We're functionally pretty well all water. We function as an electrical system, and we work on perhaps as many as 1.2 million variations of electrical energy. And it's not unlike a radio that you turn the dial to a certain number. You're on a certain frequency, you get a certain program. Your body functioning much the same. Now, if the dial is turned slightly one way or the other, then you end up getting nothing but static. You don't hear the program. So what we do is we adjust or determine what normalcy is in a frequency base, and that basically becomes a number which controls that frequency. And then we're able to bring your body into balance. And much like the radio, when you're on frequency, you hear the program, and your body's on frequency, it's delivering a program. And if these programs all come together, and it's called life. If in fact some aren't getting delivered, then life isn't complete. Whether it's harmful or not depends on how out of balance it gets. So it's a matter of going through and trying to find normalcy and a balance. In a general sense, that's how we function.
I see.
My information, fortunately, I use a dowsing rod, which I hold in my hand, and the rod I ask for the help from a higher source. And by doing that, I ask the question, is there, assuming we're looking for, say, a frequency, for ridding of a virus. Let's assume that a person has a virus, and the rod will move and say yes. I'm just simulating this at the moment. And then I say, is there a frequency that will eliminate the virus? And the rod says yes. Okay, give me that number, and it'll give me a little yes. And I start counting 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 96, 97, it quits. Okay, the number is 96. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, it quits. So the next number is 33. And we'll do that until we have 11 digits. And that number, then I would test you, assuming this is where the virus is, and would you have that number, and you would not have that number. But I would then check myself or anybody else in the room to see, and they don't have a virus, but they have that number. So what had happened is your body, which had a natural protection against that virus, has lost that protection. It's gone, and like the radio, it's gone and turned to static, and we're now going to move you back to the program. And when we do that, the virus will be gone.
I see. So is everyone born with all the numbers, or are we deficient in numbers at birth in some cases?
Well, we basically are born with the numbers, and we may be deficient in numbers from time to time, having a problem, but by and large, we are born with them. Normalcy, you can be abnormal and basically have chromosomes missing or whatever might be the case. But let's say a healthy birth would have all these protection numbers.
So what causes the numbers to become deficient later on?
Well, that is always a good question, but it may be trauma, always a potential in a trauma. It could be constant fear in some cases where the body is in constant fear, and it may be as simple as basically losing your home as you get a little older, not as an infant, but as you're a little older, we're going to lose our home, and you're struggling and you're struggling and you're struggling. That constant fear can have a bearing on, and I believe it has a bearing on chromosome 20. And chromosome 20 quits functioning properly at some point, and then it basically sends a condition to the body that the body recognizes this stress and the failure of chromosome 20, and it basically starts to produce immature blood cells. So pretty soon your body's full of immature blood cells, and you're basically heading into leukemia. And so it's a matter really of identifying that and energizing chromosome 20 so that the body comes back to producing mature blood cells. And of course, once the mature blood cells are replaced in the body, and it takes an hour or so before that would happen, then your body returns to normalcy and the leukemia-like condition basically fades away. If that isn't attended to, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then the treatment, the normal medical treatment would be to use various cancer types of treatments to overcome it. But it's a long, drawn-out process. Doing it energetically, it takes about an hour and a half.
I see. So are there any limits to, I've felt inside for a long time that this was going to become possible at some point. So for me, it's really exciting to be here and be a part of and help you to reach a bigger audience with what you're doing, because I think this is the future of health. But do you think that there is any limit to the potential of this? I mean, is there anything we can't do in the body?
Well, certainly if you've had an accident and your arm is down the road and your leg is over here in the ditch, you don't want to do this program. You want to be in a hospital with the pieces and see if they can put you back together.
Yeah.
So to that extent, it's beyond the capacity of this. But it may well be that this program basically compromises the medical profession and what they haven't been able to do in their methodology that they use. And maybe that is all we are, is frequencies. So it's a matter of identifying that balancing frequency that perhaps will activate normalcy. Another one that besides leukemia, which perhaps is one of the ones that works very well, is also MS, identifying that the body has basically got discomfort, and you have no reason for the discomfort. You haven't had any injury or whatnot, but you nevertheless have discomfort. And so we determined that it basically is the myelin sheath is being attacked by the immune system in the body. So we determine where is the message coming from, and we look at the hypothalamus and determine the hypothalamus is sending out a signal that the immune system is picking up on, and it is primarily attacking the body. So we basically scramble that message. And it's done with a number that counters the message from the hypothalamus, and that stops immediately. The immune system is no longer attacking. Now the damage has been done to the to the tissue covering the nervous system, the myelin sheath, and so it's a matter of repairing now. So we activate a stem cell number, healing number in the body, and we charge it up and get it in there, and within about 10 minutes it's identifiable by my method where that healing is taking place. And it very often, or most often, will be where your discomfort has been. All at once, if it's been in your leg, I will be able to read stem cell healing in that area over a period of probably anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks, or maybe even up into several months. That healing process will continue. As you repeat the healing numbers each day, it will continue, and finally the discomfort will slowly but steadily fade away.
Can you share a couple of examples of real-life experiences where people recovered from something that ordinarily would not have happened?
Well, we got lots of samples that...
Just pick two of the most...
Well, certainly the MS description is a common one. In this particular trip to this community, I believe it was on Friday, out of about 7 people a day we do, it takes about an hour per person, and we had 3 people in a row that really had a form of MS. And so that can happen, a lot of that going around. We also found more in an abundance in here of what we describe as leukemia-like conditions. And that's the one I described, where the chromosome 20 becomes non-functional and the body starts to produce immature blood cells which lead into the leukemia-like condition over a period of time. Those are the 2 biggies that can really affect you. And then we deal with all kinds of variations. Dealing with a person this morning with autism and trying to rebalance their body and bring them out of the autistic position they're in and try to return them into a more normal position. A lot of these things don't play out immediately, so it's a matter of having a period of time, continue to do the balancing figure numbers we've given, and over a period of time we hope that the body will become more and more normal. And if you can get it normal enough, in my opinion, that it will start to pick up that we haven't worked on and return it to normal function.
Have you had any success with autism where you were actually able to see the end result?
Oh, yeah. In all cases.
And how long does it usually take to see a result?
Well, some of them probably a matter of a few days, and some of them perhaps maybe a month or so. But we also take a situation where we can identify that there is an abnormalcy. In other words, we don't know what the problem is, but it is abnormal in that framework. They've got something affecting them, and we can then develop the frequency to eliminate what is creating the abnormality. I did a person over the telephone a number of years ago that was in a hospital in Quebec, Canada, and he had reported to his sister, the one that called me, and asked if I could help him. And I said, well, what is his problem? And she discussed it, and I said, well, let me call him and see. So I called him, and he took the phone, and I said, I understand you have kidney failure. And he said, yes. And I said, any idea what is causing it? And he said, no. And medical hadn't figured out yet what it was the cause. I said, well, let's work on the basis that your kidneys are weak, medium, or strong. And I measured that with my dowsing, determined that they were very weak. So I said, okay. I asked for the help to develop the frequency number that would eliminate that is causing the weakness in the kidneys. And my rod indicated that I could develop a number, and I did. I developed that number, and I did it as I was showing you, counting. And as I finished the number, I basically said, okay, here's the number. He wrote it down, and I said, now read it over and over again. And what you're doing really is basically sending a message or an intention to the body. And we'll go into that just a slight bit here shortly. But anyway, he basically read the number, and within a few minutes I could read his kidneys were much stronger. So I said, I think you're going to be fine. Do that number often. Repeat it 7 or 8 times each time, and perhaps do it every hour. And about 2 days later, he called me and thanked me. He said, I'm out of the hospital. I said, I'm feeling fine. We never did figure out what his problem was, but we basically got rid of it. And so a lot of work is done when you really don't know what the problem is. You can just diagnose it's abnormal, and you basically return it to normalcy.
There's a book I have in my library. It's called Maharaj. It's about this Indian yogi who lived to 185 years. And he, apparently in India there is this ancient practice that is handed down by word of mouth, and where what he did was every 50 or so years he would go in this underground cave, and he'd meditate for 3 months, and he was administered specific herbs and milk, I guess, some kind of concoction. Nobody knows what it is, but he would come out after 3 months underground, and he regrew all of his hair and went back to his natural color, and his teeth all regrew as well. And I always wondered, do you suppose that combination of herbs is somehow creating a particular kind of frequency that is producing that result? That every 50 years he could rejuvenate his body like that?
Well, when you get into this field, you don't deny anything,
Yeah.
because you see so many situations that are unexplainable happen. You just have to leave your mind open. But in a scenario like that, obviously he was fed a certain combination, which were very energetic, possibly. But you can't rule out the dirt that he's under, because the energy in the earth may also be playing a role. And you maybe can't rule out the fact that he's away from energies that are aging him. And so there's all kinds of the puzzle have to come together. But, the overall comment or picture is totally possible. I have no idea how to make it happen. From my perspective, I deal with it as I'm able to deal with it, but and certainly it would be great to be able to regenerate the gross teeth.
Yeah.
And I've heard several stories where that has basically happened. I have not been able to make it happen. I have attempted, but I've not been successful in that particular area.
So the people who you said it's happened, they're not people you worked with, or they're people you worked with and it happened accidentally, or how?
With the teeth?
Yeah, with the teeth. Yeah.
No, it was a direct effort to see if we could help them. One lady had a baby tooth.
Uh-huh.
She's probably well-bound baby tooth, probably in her mid-40s. Still had a baby tooth that had never come out. So our effort was to try to replace her back into the stage of her life that teeth would grow. My theory is that the body moves forward as we age. So we pass through the stages of puberty, with the stages of growing teeth and whatnot. And once you get out of that energetic reality of time frame, then it's basically not likely that you've got the capacity to do anymore. But if you can move and determine what that energy was and move the body back into that time frame, the theory being, now you're able to perhaps regrow teeth.
I see.
Yeah, whatever that is.
I see. So you were able to do it in her case.
I tried to do it in her
you
case,
tried
but
to.
she did not lose a tooth, and she
Oh.
did not gain another tooth. So I've never been successful in the teeth end of it.
What about hair color and regrowth?
I've done some work on hair, and for women, it's been helpful. Mostly women that have hair falling out excessively, stopping that, and their hair becomes more normal again. As far as men are concerned, I have never really put the effort forward in that area, because I feel there's many options out there that perhaps would be better done. So I try to stay away from the cosmetic side of things and basically deal with, things that are perhaps a little more life-threatening, and try to eliminate that.
So typically it sounds like do most of the people who come to you experience a change immediately, or is it a period of days? Or
many of them, as they're sitting there, can feel the energy shifts, and they'll leave the session feeling better than they did when they came. Many times.
I see. So is this something you were born with, or is it something that developed later on? Maybe you can give us a little bit of background on your story.
One doesn't really know why one can do whatever.
Yeah.
And but it didn't happen until I had a heart attack, which happened when I was 60. And I had a near-death experience in trying to get to a hospital from where I was having the heart attack. And I was in Canada, in a bit of a remote area, and I had 60 miles to drive, and I was alone. And I couldn't stay conscious. And I kept wanting to pass out, and I'm extremely nauseated. And so I would drive for a while, and I'd wake up, and I'd be on the wrong side of the road, and I'd have to get back on my side of the road, and vehicles coming would swerve and go back on their side of the road because they were seeing where I was. They were reacting. But it took me 6 hours to go 60 miles. I checked into the hospital, and I was in a full-blown heart attack, which they managed to stabilize, and I suffered some minor heart damage, but nothing particularly excessive. And it was over a period of months from there, and that they determined that I needed to have a stent placed in my system to push back the restriction that was causing the restriction of blood flow. And we did that, and at the time they did it, they had determined there should be about 3 in total placed in my body. Well, they couldn't. The time it took to get around my particular problem basically left us very little time to do any more. So they said, well, we'll keep an eye on it, and probably in the next couple of years you'll have to come back in and we'll do 2 more. Well, that did happen about 3 years later, and I went back in, and they basically determined there was even a 4th one, which they were going to do an angioplasty, and that's when they go in and just expand the artery and basically come out. And I talked them into putting a stent in that particular spot too. They'd already determined the other 2 spots, which had been identified originally, would be done with stents. So by the time I came out of that, I was the owner of 4 stents that are placed in my circulatory. I subsequent after that, probably 6-7 years later, had some continuing problems and had to go in and have a quadruple heart bypass, which is now 5 years ago. So I've dealt with a heart problem all my life because my condition, as it turned out in the first instance, was that I was plumbed with your heart. Plumbing should come up, arteries, and feed into your heart. Mine come up behind the heart and come over the top and go in. And this was my lifelong restriction. So as a child, anytime I did anything fast, ran or whatnot, and very shortly I would have angina in my jaw. Incredible pain in my bottom teeth and my jaw. And nobody ever related to it until I was in the operating room at 60, that was really my problem. And so that's why they had so much trouble getting something flexible enough to go round that bend.
So, do you think that these kinds of modalities are becoming possible now? Because you talked a little bit at your lecture that I attended about dimensions and how you've noticed that the majority of people are moving to the 5th dimension now, right? Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. When did you first notice people were moving to the 5th dimension, and what was the dimension we were in prior to that?
When we first started in this business, and I took on the awareness and the opinion that we function in a certain energetic position, we were primarily in the 3rd dimension. And there really wasn't much variation from people at that time. Pretty well everybody was in the 3rd dimension. Now, it doesn't necessarily apply in all parts of the world. Some other parts of the world, the dimension movement is much slower, perhaps affected somewhat by the constraints of religion and thought. But nevertheless, we moved about probably about 7 or 8 years ago, we started to move to a higher dimension, which was the fifth dimension. Some people were in the fourth for a short period of time, but it was almost as like a stepping stone. But most people just moved to the fifth dimension. But we found that also there were some people overrunning the fifth dimension and ending up in the sixth dimension. And we started to find after a while that there were more and more people in various types of descriptions called ADD, ADHD, and various descriptions of conditions that people had, and we found that they're in the sixth dimension. And at that time and to this time, I determined that the sixth dimension is a bit of a chaotic energy form, and that the brain doesn't function well in that energy pattern. We've developed a frequency that we can bring you back to the fifth dimension, and people feel more grounded and can be more comfortable in that dimension. But there are a lot of people still in the sixth dimension that have to fight with a situation where they can't finish a mental plan or a mental stability because of this chaotic situation that's going on in their mind.
So is it as simple as using this number to mitigate or resolve an issue with ADD or ADHD?
I can't say that I've done enough people to know whether you cure all the problems, but even they are more comfortable in the fifth dimension. And it indicates that by dowsing that the sixth dimension could become stable, perhaps even in the near future. And so with that happening, perhaps we would find that there would be more stability in that dimension once the energy basically that's affecting it is brought into reality.
Is there any difference between people who are born into the fifth dimension versus the rest of us who've been around and shifted to the fifth?
Not that I've been able to determine. I don't think I've ever seen an infant born into the sixth dimension. And most of them, and a lot of them are young people, but most of them are not in the infant stage. There is another dimension that starts to show up primarily in caregivers such as nurses, sometimes massage therapists and people and light workers, and they'll be in the eighth dimension. And the eighth dimension is a very stable dimension, but it's primarily those type of people that you might determine are in it.
Now, do you think that, I've also just recently interviewed another woman by the name of Sherry Edwards, and she is actually using frequency in not the same way that you are, but she does use sound frequency to alter health, and she's even, one of her things that she told me was she even managed to have a person's jaw widen using just a sound frequency, and she can analyze 30 seconds of your voice and tell you all about your personality and so on. Mm-hmm. But my question is, do you think that these kinds of modalities are suddenly becoming possible for in the world? Obviously they've been possible all along, but they're coming out to the world in a bigger way because of this shift to the fifth dimension? Does that have anything to do with this becoming available?
Well, I'm not too sure I can credit any particular thing, but I think that as time has gone on, we are more and more enlightened. And so the enlightening process, yes, I think has brought on the reality that there are what we really are. And we really basically are nothing but energy and an electrical system. We're not a chemical system, although we do have chemicals, but we are an electrical system. So the realization that makes more sense is really evolving.
You did say in your lecture that it's possible to move a person from one dimension to another. You just said you can move them back from the sixth to the fifth. And you mentioned that there are a couple people who you have moved from the fifth to the 12th.
Yes.
Can
12th
you
dimension is a very rare dimension.
Uh-huh.
The few people that are in it naturally have some very very distinct capabilities. Not the same, they're totally different capabilities, but they're particularly credible in those particular areas. I'm not going to go into the details of them. I think it's invasion of their privacy to some extent. But more and more, I'm starting to see the odd person coming into the 12th dimension. At least I'm identifying them as being there, and they all have some unique qualities. So yes, I've developed, I primarily did it initially to try to help people that were in a cancerous situation and had pain to deal with, that I determined that if they were in part the makeup of the 12th dimension, they weren't in the 12th dimension entirely, but they had energy in part heading that way, that they could psychologically manage their pain. And so that was my effort initially, was to develop that capability. And it worked to some extent. The woman was fairly well advanced, and so it's probably something that would be done earlier, but we've since learned how to create basically the energy of countering pain, and we can put it into water, and we can supercharge the water so that the pain-killing capability is much higher. And so by just playing the water along their left-hand side, their body takes the energy in, which actually comes in your left-hand side of your body, and basically discharges out your right, so we feed the energy in through the left-hand side. So we've developed some methods of controlling pain that are very non-invasive, but very effective.
I spent a number of years studying water, which is, most people find that really odd that you would study water. But and so I know that you have a very unique understanding of water, which I can relate to quite a bit, actually. Can you share a little bit about how you see water, and talk a little about your nanowater?
Water primarily is, in order for it to evaporate into clouds and subsequently fall as rainfall and snowfall and fill our streams with water, it basically has to be in a nanoparticle form. It's a very small particle. And it's in that size, it basically forms our rain, and it fills our streams, which we were designed to be drinking from. But in our wisdom and our advancement as a culture, we have determined that moving that water to a tap under pressure was much more desirable than having to traipse off to the stream in the mountain. But in doing so, perhaps we have done something that we weren't aware of, and that is that in this water pressurization that takes place, these little nanoparticles statically bind together, and they come into a micron particle by and large. A micron particle is 1,000 times larger than a nanoparticle. So where we were supposed to be able to hydrate our cells and remove the spent energy, we're finding our particle of water is way too large, and we're not getting inner cell hydration. So consequently, and it may be our biggest problem with cancer, is that is happening, because we're not able to get in. So a cancer can get into the cell, and there's nothing going to come in and basically compromise it. So perhaps our best protection against cancer is to consume a certain amount of nano water. And by doing that, you get the inner cell hydration. Most people, inner cell hydration is somewhere between 30 and 40, and it should be between 50 and 60. You're born at about 72. A new infant would be inner cell hydrated in the range of about 72. We lose that as we get older, and I've tested some people that are quite elderly, and they may be down in near 20. They're just physically drying up.
So you're talking about spring water from a mountain having this nanoparticle size. What happens with bottled water? If you bottle water from a spring from a mountain and you sit it on a shelf, does that change the nanoparticle?
Well, no. The problem is that it's generally always subject to pressurization, either in filling the system, but somewhere in the system they will be pressurizing the water, and of course you end up with the same binding effect, and you're back into micron water. So most water that is delivered is in the form of micron. Now, if you have a well and you're pulling your water out of the well, you may find the water in the well will not be micron. It will be nano water because it's never been pressurized. But you do pressurize it to some extent to get it out of the well, but it's generally not so long a period of time, and the pressurization isn't necessarily as high, and so consequently you can end up with nano water in that type of application. Certainly if you were to pull your water with a bucket, it would be nano water. And certainly the streams that are flowing water that have never gone through pressurization will be nano water.
Can you take pressurized water and turn it into nano water?
I have, in our program, we basically take water from a domestic system and we basically strip everything out of it through an ionizing process, and our water is basically barren water. And then but it does come out through the process in a nanoparticle form. So all we've really done is taken the stress out of the micron particle and it falls apart into nano. And basically, in our application, we also alkalize the water so that we start out with a water that's been stripped of virtually everything and basically is in a alkalinic state. Then and in a nano state. Then we go ahead and add all our energies to it, which represents all the vitamins, minerals, salts, sugars, and whatnot that the body needs are added in, and it's all done energetically. And those particular isotopes that are in that water are all energetic isotopes, not material isotopes. In the isotopic family, and an isotope, for lack of a professional explanation, is a family member, for a better way of describing. You are an isotope of your family, your sister's an isotope, your brother's an isotope, your mother's an isotope, your father's an isotope. And look at isotopes as being that in the mineral family. And there's generally somewhere around 20 to 22 isotopes in a mineral family. Now there will only be one of those total of 20 that is suitable for the human body, and that is an energetic isotope. It's not in a material state at all. And so that's the one the body needs. And that is the one that our food supply pick up, because as the water rains or is watered, it goes down through the soil, and the soil happens to have the mineral, let's say, of calcium in the soil. It has to be calcium isotope 46. If it's any other isotope, it's the wrong isotope. But the isotope 46, being an energetic isotope, will immediately energize the water that's passing through it. Now the plant takes that water in, and it basically has calcium 46 in it, and it basically concentrates that. As the evaporation from the plant goes on, the mineral does not. The energy stays in the plant. So that's why herbs and plants basically supply us with the correct isotope, because they can't pick up a material isotope because it won't go in, it won't energize the water. And it's that subtlety that is the difference of getting the right mineralization. And so very often in our minerals that we take as supplements are made of a material state and rather than an energetic state. And so we basically get those wrong isotopes into our body. But it won't ever come from the food supply, or I shouldn't say ever, but it won't come from the food supply, but it can certainly come from additives. Take a bottle of orange juice in a supermarket, and you can take it, and a good test is to do a tip test. Take the orange juice bottle and hold it to your chest, and put your right hand on top of your left hand, the left hand holding the component, and it will probably, if you ask, is this good for my body, it will tilt you forward. That's saying yes. But if it pushes you back, then it's saying no. Well, the orange juice will push you forward, saying it's good for you. But put in vitamin D added and calcium added, and then you may find the same containment size of orange juice now pushes you back, because they've gone and added in the wrong vitamin D and the wrong isotope of calcium.
I see.
And that's so very often happens.
When we take a plant-based supplement, it contains measurable minerals in it, right? So what are those? Are those not contributing any value to us? Is it just the isotope, or are those the collection of the isotopes?
Those are the
accumulation.
They will carry the isotope that you're talking about, and they will be beneficial. So plants are good for you, and anything that's created from a plant base will be general. But it's not saying that it has everything you want. Take a spinach will pick up iron. Well, it may not pick up any other mineral. So you have to take a broad base or a company that makes theirs from plant base. But on the other hand, the plant has to be grown on soil that possesses the material, the mineral, because it's really just part of the system of transferring energy from the soil to the plant, to us, and on from there.
So the soil has to have the isotope in the soil in order for the plant to have
That's right.
But not every plant is equipped to take every isotope from every soil either. Okay.
It's specific.
So if we were to take your nano water and do a physical measurement, we wouldn't actually find anything physical in it, right?
No.
It's all energetic.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you mentioned in your lecture the other day that you could take I don't know if it was spinach or whatever, but lay it on a bottle of your water and it will absorb all the nutrients?
Yeah, because it's nothing but energy. It's much the same idea in the soil. And you lay it on the bottle has the energetic isotope. But in the case of a plant, the plant is now a captive. And you basically put it on, and the moisture in the plant is a conductor, and so allows the energy from our bottle to penetrate the wall of the bottle and on into the plant. But it would take, say in the case of spinach, where you would have iron potential in the ground, it wouldn't have the potential to, say, pick up potassium, manganese, or whatever it might be, other minerals. But when you do it and all the minerals are in the bottle, then all of that energy goes into the plant. It's an artificial way of doing it, but you basically totally mineralize, and totally also the vitamins and whatnot are all basically done energetically. So when you eat that, you get the benefit that the plant would give you, but it's much improved by its diversity. And the same thing with eggs. You can put eggs in a pan of water and leave them for 15-20 minutes. The energy is penetrated through the wall of the egg, and the egg now has everything that water has in it, in an energetic form, is now in the egg. So it's a way of getting your food supply into a much higher level.
So we could just eat eggs that were...
Well, there's some merit. I've dealt with several people that have wanted to go on to a fast.
You were working with breatharians, I remember too, right?
Yeah. And they wanted to go on a fast, and they were inquiring as to whether our water would be a good additive to their effort. And they found that in a 90-day fast that they had no problem whatsoever, but they were drinking, I'm not too sure of the quantity, but I believe it was a glass or about 8 ounces a day of our water. So they were getting all the minerals and the vitamins and whatnot, so the body, but there's no reason why, I've never tried it yet, that you couldn't read the number. We have a nutritional section in our manual for 3 pages, and you'll have carrots, and it'll give the frequency that is put out by a carrot. And if you were to read that frequency over and over again 5 to 10 times, you just ate carrots. You got the same energy by that method as you would have got if you had ate the carrots. So the point being is that, and I will do it someday, I'll make up a manual, and you'll have it if you're a hiker and whatnot and get lost. You will have information, or you can read the number for carrots. I'll have carrots today, and you can read the numbers, and you may very well be able to sustain a presence of nourishment into the body, even though there's nothing physical about what you're intaking, but energetically you're intaking.
So those people who did the 30-day or 90-day fast, did they not get hungry at all?
No, they claim not.
Really? Huh.
No, they claim not. They claim it was not a big deal.
I see.
Yeah.
And were these the breatharians you were working with, or the same group?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
And several others other than that too.
Uh-huh.
Been a number of people over the years that have done it.
I see. Very interesting. So what about this myth that's in our society here that you have to drink 8 glasses of water a day?
Absolutely false. But on the other hand, in order to reach a hydration level, you may find that out of those 8 glasses, that you're getting relatively little of it into your cells. So when you get into drinking nano water, you may find you're much more comfortable with just a glass a day and find that you don't have any desire to have more water, but you're satisfying the need of the body with a considerable less amount of water. I just do not believe that 8 glasses a day is necessary, and you're probably transferring a lot of energy out of the body in the form of minerals and whatnot that really need to be left there. But no, I don't agree with the 8 glasses. You may drink more water if you're outside and you're running a jackhammer on a hot day and whatnot. You may perspire a lot of water and you need to replace that. But in a general application for people in a controlled environment, life such as working in an office or a facility and driving in a car with air conditioning and whatnot, you just do not need that much water.
So our bodies, if I'm understanding you correctly, are essentially a combination of frequencies, right?
Right.
So are our bodies being impacted constantly by other frequencies in our environment, such as cell phones and radio towers and television? Are those all affecting that frequency?
Well, certainly on some more so than others. The body has got a capability of protecting itself. For those that are healthy enough and whatnot, perhaps they can put up with a lot of the influences. And perhaps have had to over the years because the environmental effects perhaps are changing on an ongoing basis too. So the body has to be prepared to accept that and go on. But in many cases, there are people that are affected in a very damaging way by EMF and other energies that are out there that I think one of the energies that we're starting to see having a negative effect is coming from the meters.
Smart meters, yeah.
Yeah, and basically that's very negative. Even the bulbs that are the
compact fluorescent.
Yeah, compact fluorescent are putting out an energy that's unhealthy.
So it could be that these adverse frequencies are part of the reason why we're missing frequencies as we get older.
And it's a good question, but the answer is yet to be developed yet. It's just how much damage is being done. GMOs, another one is what kind of negative effect is it having? I'm of the opinion that in the GMOs that perhaps what we have to do is develop the ability to help our bodies adjust to it, because it's a good possibility we're not going to go backwards on it. There's benefits in the production of a product and whatnot that is desirable to do it with GMO. But on the other hand, it may be having a very negative effect on certain people.
What about music, though? Music is frequency as well.
It is.
And so would listening to certain music enhance health and other music actually deplete those frequencies that are maintaining good health or rewrite them?
Well, there's no question about it. Some music is not healthy, and some music is healthy. It's a matter of determining which is which, and whether your body's strong enough to put up with the odd song that's not healthy and not perish with it. It's basically a good question. I think that we probably are strong enough to handle a certain amount of bad music without affecting us too badly, but on an ongoing basis, it may well be a bigger item for those that get a lot of bad music. Is what is it doing to them? It's a good question.
Is there any particular category of music you found to be especially beneficial or adverse, or are they just vary depending on the song?
I'm not an expert in even being able to describe music, but certainly the let's say some of the classics are probably be very healthy.
Classical.
If it doesn't have to be classical by somebody that we all know, it may be somebody that we don't know, and their music is in a classical category. It could be very healthy, but I certainly can read music as to whether it's healthy or not healthy.
What about anti-aging? Is it possible? I know you've been working with your horse. That's ridiculously old now, right?
33. Yeah.
Is that old for a horse? I don't really know.
Yeah, apparently.
Okay.
Apparently it is getting up there.
And so you've been able to prevent your horse from dying several times.
Yeah.
Can that be done with humans too?
Well, you don't know. I mean, you're working on humans all the time, and many of them are alive. We do have a number, and I think it's basically the choice of the human. And my mother is perhaps an example of that she had reached 93 and a half, had suffered from cancer, although we had helped her, and she had managed to sustain life probably for 12, 13 years with this identified cancer condition. But she got to a point where she was tired, and she wanted to go, and cancer had basically resurrected itself and was basically actively in her system again, and she was really not in a mood to want to tackle it any longer. So I have a number that basically is an ID number, an identification number of whether death is in a particular animal's body or in a particular her case. But in the horse case, I basically had the horse laying in the corral, but he doesn't normally lay down that much, and he wasn't moving, and so I went and got my book and got the number out, and I could read the number 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going to give you the number, but at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But basically when I read it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 was not there, but 10 and 11 was. And the numbers build from the right to the left. So as he basically, time went on and his condition became more aggravated, all at once 9 was also available. 9, 10, 11. And then in a little while 8 was showing up. So in other words, the progression of death was on its way. And so when we figured out what his problem was and we started to treat him for it, he was up, say, to about 7. And so as we started to treat him, all at once 7 disappeared and went back to 8. And then 9, and then 10, 11, and back, the number disappeared. So now he was up on his feet, and he was basically treated. So it's quite neat the way that thing, but it's very handy if you're dealing with animals as to just where they are in the progression of life and death. But it did work with my mother too, and she took about 5 or 6 days to get there, but as she progressed day by day, the number came, and on the final day when she passed, the number was fully identifiable.
I see. So did you try to prevent her death in that case?
No.
You didn't.
No, she was
not
wanting to be.
She didn't want to be, right.
Yeah, she wanted to go. So we used her situation to identify what we had created and to see whether there was some merit to it, and it was very much that way.
Is it possible to know how long a person is going to live with this technique,
Not
or is
really.
it just based on when they're getting ready to die?
Yeah, you just notice they're getting closer all the time, or not. They may be told at a certain point, and they're not moving any closer to death. And but that's your monitor more or less as to just what you're dealing with.
So using this with your horse, is your horse still in excellent health?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's...
Hey, still eating hay every day, damn it.
So would you say this is you're preventing death or you're anti-aging? I mean, is he actually behaving like a younger horse, or is...
Oh, he's getting older, and he basically has the symptoms of old age. But it's not a life and death. He's very much alive. So you're not dealing with him in a potential death scenario that's aware at this time.
I see.
Yeah.
So, have you ever done? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, fine.
So, have you identified any frequencies that actually reverse aging or prevent the aging process, whether in animals or in humans?
Well, it's a matter of the body being healthy and basically, just alive. And so that particular instance was just identifying perhaps the loss of life commencing. But if we find somebody that is very sick, we correct it. That's the whole idea. So it's a matter of treating maybe cancer. Now, you're not always successful in fighting because it's an energy in itself, and if it's well established and you're riddled with cancer, you may very well not be able to save the person. But it's a matter of attempting to do what we can to create countering numbers, because the theory is that if you've got a number that is a life threatener, then it can be offset with a number that's a life saver. It's a matter of determining what is the threatener and then developing what could be the savior.
I see. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the telomeres, or like the little caps on the end of your DNA.
Yeah.
As you get
Telomeres.
older. Telomeres, yeah. They get shorter as you get older,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And then, like the Cancer Society did a research study where they said that most people who have cancer have very short telomeres.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, if your telomeres are not short, then you can't get a serious illness.
And we have several numbers in our program where we basically develop an abundance of new telomeres, create new ones, and also strengthen the ones that are there. Part of an anti-aging effort.
I see. What kind of results have people noticed from doing that?
Well, you don't know. You can only measure today. You can't measure, if you hadn't done this, you'd have been dead a week and a half ago. You
Right.
just don't have that capacity to establish that. So all you can really do is relate to today, and we're basically proceeding, living longer, and it's ultimately a measurement as you go along.
So has anybody noticed any anti-aging effects at all?
No,
not
that I'm aware of.
Okay. I know that you can also not only repair DNA, but replace damaged chromosomes and so on.
Yes.
Can you explain how that works, or how that's even possible?
Well, everything is a frequency, and everything in frequency is a mathematical on-off switch. And that's really what the number is basically the switch for that, in this case, chromosome. And when you read that number over and over again, and what you're doing is sending an intention to the body. And I will touch on that, which I suggested earlier I would touch on, remind me to get into that. But what you do is you basically read that number over and over again, and you're sending a signal, and the body at some point recognizes the signal and makes the correction. You turn the switch on. And so we can replace and put chromosomes back into activity that are not active.
Have you actually done that in any cases?
Oh, many cases.
And what's the result? Well, give me an example of somebody who had a damaged or missing chromosome, and what result happened because you did this.
Well, when we do chromosome 20 and reactivate it in a case of a person with a leukemia-like condition, within a matter of hours, the energy level comes way up. And certainly within a matter of days, they're feeling much healthier and much more vibrant and vigorous. But generally one of the symptoms is you just have no energy. So there's a correction happens fairly quickly once you bring chromosome 20 back into function. It also basically, the spleen will be stripping out all the immature blood cells of the body, and it's totally overworked and very weak. And as you get rid of the immature blood cells and mature blood cells are now replacing them, the spleen gets stronger and stronger and back to normal, but as the filtering process is no longer required. That's one area. There's another area where in autism we have managed to create a different frequency in chromosome. It's perhaps chromosome 18 and maybe 19 combined. And when you put those back into function, then there appears to be some change in autism. Too early to know just to what extent, and whether it is certainly not so far not an instant change. It changes the fact that they're autistic in my testing, but it doesn't necessarily change their behavior yet.
So do you foresee we'll be able to extend human life indefinitely at some point if this research goes further?
God forbid. There's no reason why, with a better understanding and an application of getting it into the body, that it shouldn't help. To what extent, I really have never prophesized what is possible out there, because it would be strictly a prophecy at this stage of the game and no evidence, obviously.
Right.
But something is happening that is certainly extending life, although not everybody is blessed to have that experience. I think back of my high school friends and how many of them have passed on, and it's becoming a fairly high percentage. And you wonder what is the difference between why did they go, but for one reason or another that has happened. So it creates a question, and it probably presents an opportunity to do something about it. So what I'm working on at the present time is taking that segment of society, let's use cancer as an example, that don't have cancer, never have had cancer, and perhaps never will have cancer. And what is it about their energetic makeup and their frequency, mathematical makeup, to activate their frequency base that is causing that? And we're doing it also with high blood pressure, and doing it with trying to think right now which the other ones we're doing, diabetes and heart disease. So we're working on those 4. So we've developed a new number. And when we find a person that has cancer, we're able to detect that your cancer energy is in your body. We're able to take this number that we have created, and they read that number, and then we lose our detection for cancer. And we're hoping that that means that their body is now suppressing that particular energy. And ultimately, if you keep doing the number, keep that number present, that you will keep it suppressed, time will tell.
So it sounds like there's a difference between aging and illness. So you can obviously mitigate illnesses, but it doesn't stop aging. Is that correct?
We're not, other than a few items in a few different areas that are anti-aging, telomeres being one of them. We're primarily the disease, of course, and the illness, of course, can eliminate the aging process, by death. So that took care of any more age on that one. So it's probably an area that it has to be part and part. Now, if you can get a sequence of totally healthy numbers, and I have borrowed a book from this office, actually, with National Geographic, that had everybody in it was in the 90s and 100 years of age, so I can douse off of a picture and see if there aren't special frequencies in them that have allowed them to get that far and still be functioning. So it's an ongoing effort to try to determine that. My biggest problem is I have to work off of pictures or television or something, because I don't know that many 100-year-old people.
I see. So
you don't have life specimens to work with all the time.
So at some point, if you can identify the number, then you could extend someone's life to an equal length, basically.
Yeah, but it makes good sense. So that should be totally possible. Yeah, it's a matter of determining, okay, what is it that they had that allowed them to get there?
Well, you mentioned earlier that there was something else you wanted to talk about with regard to genetics, DNA.
It slipped my mind for a minute, but it came back twice. Let's hope that it reappears. This is what I had in mind I wanted to bring up. Tracy, you?
Intention.
Oh, yeah, intention. It's primarily our body is capable of understanding intention. And you can have color therapy, and it's a matter of variations of colors, and some of those colors or combinations even can be very therapeutic. And the question arises, well, how in the world can a color perhaps help me? It's because the body has the ability to understand intention, and that color is sending an intention, recognizable by your subconscious in the body. Music certainly can be therapeutic. And, what does music deliver other than it basically the body can recognize in a therapeutic? A cat purring is therapeutic, the purr of a kitty cat. I didn't know until the other day that lions don't purr. So you don't want to necessarily cuddle a lion, but certainly a kitty cat that get on you and purr or near you is supposed to be therapeutic. And but on the other hand, you get on to a next stage and you go into pharmaceuticals. And what are pharmaceuticals other than a makeup of chemicals that basically they put into a combination and feed it to the body? But what is that chemical, that little white pill, what is it doing but sending an intention to the body? And the body is responding as best as it can to what message it's getting from the medication. Now, in some cases, it may not be enough to satisfy the need of, in this case, perhaps illness, so you change the medication and try another one. So you're trying to get as close as you can to what is needed. In the case of numbers are nothing more than the basic frequency that perhaps, in the way I develop them, that you need to be precisely on track to send an intention to the body. Now, if you had a medication, I can develop the frequency of that medication. I can turn that into a number that you can take the number and perhaps get your medication by repeating that number. You can also very often take the medication, put it in a sandwich bag, small plastic bag, and put it in your left pocket. And you may find that you're getting the intention through the bag into your left side of your body, which feeds your body to basically supply the intention to give you the benefit of the medication. But you don't have to deal with the chemicals. So your body and the liver and the kidneys and all the rest of it aren't being affected when you're basically feeding it from the outside. And there are products out there, a cigarette anti-nicotine patch that you put on your arm to help you to quit smoking. You can also, I understand, there are also birth control formulas now that you can get in a patch and you put it on your arm and it's feeding energy into your body and you're getting the effects. So you're starting to see some of it happening, but it's still very, very limited. But certainly the energy that's put out by a medication is detectable in just what that is. We use morphine and hydromorphine for pain killing. They're in a numerical form, and we read that number or place that number on the side of a bottle of water. And within a matter of 8 hours or so, that number is now entered into the bottle of water, which was basically brought to our attention by Dr. Dr. Emoto brought that reality to us, where we could put love on the bottle of water and we had love in its content. So you can do it in the same way with a medication. You can take that medication and basically put it on the outside of the bottle, tape it on a pill, and that energy from the medication will pass into the water. You can then take, and by having the right energy build up in your own body, which we describe as a 108 frequency, you can transfer energy to that bottle by putting your right hand on and reading the number over and over again. And you can put the number into water that way, and you can also then put your hand on and raise and stabilize the potential to a very high level, say 200,000. Now, if you read the number over and over again, you're going to send an intention, and it's going to be about a 40,000 potential energy that you have been able to transfer. You can do it in a bottle of water much higher. And if you can do that, then you're sending the intention with a much bigger shot than you are by verbalizing it. So there's a lot of tricks you can do with energy, and that is along the line of what I wanted to bring out. And when you're treating somebody with, say, cancer pain, and I've done it many times, you just energize the bottle of water, set it beside their left leg, and within 5 or 10 minutes, they're feeling so much better. The pain is so much less. It's basically morphine that you're feeding them, but they have no side effects from the effects of morphine. What they have to do every once in a while, if they have basically implanted the 108 frequency, and that's a matter of reading another specific number over and over again until you all at once identify having a 108 frequency in your body. And then that allows you to be a transfer of energy. So you can then, but you just reach over and put your hand on the bottle and raise and stabilize the potential to 200,000. And you say that about 3 times, and you charge the bottle back up because your body is drawing that energy out of it as it's treating the pain.
Now, the spiritual significance of the 108 number, I know there are a lot of Indian Sanskrit chants that they chant the same thing 108 times. And
yeah.
So in Indian history, that's
big in East India.
Yeah. So it would seem to me there is some sort of spiritual connection to the 108. Well, how would you describe the 108 and its effects?
Well, I didn't know that before I was watching a video that it was on some kind of wasn't a TV program, but it was a video that I had got from somebody, and it showed them gathering water out of a spring. And I was reading what energies were in the water, and it had a 108 frequency. And then part of the commentary was that the people that drank that water had special energies, and they were medicinal and whatnot. I thought, gee, that would be neat to have, to do what they can do. And I checked myself by looking in a mirror. I can read the guy in the mirror. And I said, oh, I've got a 108 frequency. And then I checked another friend of mine, and he had a 108 frequency that was basically working with me. So they're probably natural frequencies that we sometimes have, and we're just not aware of it. And we call it, perhaps it's an entrepreneurial energy, because Howard Hughes had it, Henry Ford had it, and many entrepreneurs had that 108 frequency. And so by identifying that there may well be, it is an energy that you have that helps you to fulfill an ambition. Because these people had ambition, of course, in different fields, obviously, but nevertheless, they were successful in achieving that goal. And it may be a helpful number in that pursuit, and God knows how it plays out, but I developed it primarily to transfer energy to, as these people were represented, be able to do, and it does. And so we developed a number that basically allows you to develop a 108 frequency, and then you're able to deliver energy. Say it was a child, that you could go in and put your right hand on their left shoulder and read that number, and it'll transfer through you into the child. Or an animal, your right hand on their left-hand side. And that's how we saved the horse. My wife went into the corral and started putting numbers in to support the heart, support the lung. And basically we were supporting artificially energy into the horse because we hadn't figured out what his problem was. So I basically started going through my checkoff list, and I came across mold and checked him for basically mold, and sure enough, he had eaten some moldy hay. So we basically then neutralized the energy of the mold, and that was only a matter of minutes, and he started to flail in one thing or another. Once we got rid of that mold energy out of him, and then he started to flail, and she better get out of there, so she came out to the outside, and then she telepathically sent him energy, and he got up on his feet, and that's been 7 years ago, and he's still on his feet.
So you can give someone the 108 frequency if they don't have it already. What happens? What do they have access to with the 108 that they didn't have before?
Well, number one, they have the power of everything that's in the manual that we've created to take numbers from that and treat to somebody else. And let's say their daughter has a virus, very sick, coughing, and not well. You could go to the virus, and there's a series of numbers, but you could go ahead with your right hand on the child's left hand shoulder, if you like, or left arm or left hand. And you'd read that number over and over again, and you'd be able to eliminate the viruses that are in her body.
I see.
And so, and in the meantime, I may have even treated the child in this case, or the animal, and we do both, and determine that this is a number they need to satisfy their illness, that will eliminate their illness. So they have to keep applying it. It's like taking a medication. It takes you're going to do it for a period of time. Generally, we recommend 2 weeks. Maybe once a day, but maybe to start with, maybe 3 or 4 times a day for the first few days, and get that energy changed around in the body.
So the 108 is required for anyone who's practicing using these numbers?
Yes.
Okay. With regard to anti-aging, you said you can regrow the telomeres or something to that effect, right? Is the duration the same for those numbers? So you only have to do it for 2 weeks and the effects become permanent, or do you have to?
We recommend that you go back to it on a sometime basis, maybe every 2 weeks or once a month. Take the time to go through all your numbers and refresh them. Whether people do or not, I sure don't. But I'm the worst offender of this program. I never do a number until I get the feeling if I got a problem, then I need to do the number, and I will do it.
Yeah. And
it will work. But I'd be better off for myself if I would do it on a more regular basis, daily, for a period of time, and I probably wouldn't. But since it's so convenient for me to do it, then I get busy doing other things.
Sure. So what are your plans for the future of what you're doing, your next steps? Do you have any things?
You fly by the seat of your pants, and you're basically, I guess my biggest hope is to be able to identify that in your case you're asking about aging, that may be anti-aging, obviously, energies, and also detecting those energies that would prevent so many basic things, high blood pressure and the things that are so common. And basically these are numbers that you just will not get it, and introduce that to society to see whether or not society generally becomes a little healthier because of the energy we put out. And perhaps also in dealing with the energies of life, frequency 5, frequency 8, frequency 12, and whatnot, determining whether, if on a much larger scale, we moved everybody into a higher energy, whether we would benefit society and benefit mankind, or whether the people are just able to handle that much of it, or just what can they handle. So there's a lot of questions evolving around it, but the idea is that you may do more for world peace by raising the level of energy in everybody to a higher dimension than anything else you could do.
Well, that's an interesting, since you brought that up, I know a lot of people, especially people who will be coming to our expo, are more conscious individuals, and there's a lot of concern going on in the world about all the insane things that are happening, and that the existing structures of government and the wars and so on, which obviously are a lower consciousness type of thing. So since you're experiencing, it seems like the majority of people have moved to the fifth dimension, do you think that means that those more negative influences will not be able to thrive in the future? Or will it require another shift to, say, the 12th dimension to make that happen?
Well, there's a whole other layer to to the whole picture as well, and that is we're made up of numbers. If in fact you are a opera singer, and you are a good opera singer, you will have a specific number. All opera singers have it. And people that don't sing that well at opera may have the number, but it may be much weaker than them. So a person that is very effective in basically building wealth, they will have a number. And all the people that are very wealthy have that number. And then you basically analyze the people that are very poor, and they don't have any part of that number. So the statement is we may well be what our numbers are. And so it's a matter really of trying to determine what it is about those numbers that are detrimental. A person that can commit a premeditated murder, the types of a Bundy and some of these people, they have a frequency 52. They all have it. And they have it very strong. And then there are other people that you can analyze, and they maybe have it very weak. But when you mention that that person has a 52, most people say, that doesn't surprise me. You know, they know the person is a popular person. I'm not going to mention name, obviously. But we're made up of numbers, and it may well be that we learn someday that the numbers that are causing certain behaviors can be adjusted, so that when they go to prison, you basically eliminate or try to remove some of these numbers and basically move them out of this energetic being that they are.
I see. That's very fascinating. So you're saying that we could actually take a person who has a criminal mindset and just simply adjust that number, or take a person who's poor and adjust that number and make them rich? Or
I'm not saying they would become rich, but they may be in tune to become rich, and whatever they do may find, they're much better off than they were.
I see.
It's hard to say. I gave it out one time to a group of ladies in Long Beach, California, and they have an investment club. And they'd had the club for a period of time, and they were, doing whatever they do, but they basically started using those numbers. And at some point later, I got a call from a friend of mine that said she had talked with a couple of women, and they were doing much better now that they had the numbers. They were absolutely convinced these numbers had turned their activity into a more positive strain.
So how do we change the world and make it a more positive place using this knowledge? Is that possible?
Well, it isn't done with a swipe of a hand, I'll tell you that. But it may well be that it's a better understanding of all these variables and the energies that we are, that all come together in a bigger and better mind than mine, to say, hey, there's some merit to this, and perhaps that is a starting point. Unfortunately, some of the religions of the world basically have a detrimental effect on the body moving ahead in any personal form. Basically, you're much controlled by a dogmatic set of rules. And I have a feeling that in those particular areas, even getting out of the second or third dimension isn't happening in any great sense. So to move to the fifth or the eighth, perhaps the 12th at some point, they are not coming. And they may very well be in a mindset that where you say, be good little boys and go home, we'll send you some wheat. And then working with someone because they'd rather cut your throat than deal with you because of perhaps their belief, call it religious belief if you like. So you've got to overcome that sentimentality that exists out there, because you go back over the murders and what you've had the Boston situation, and you go through them all, and there's a pattern of that mentality based on a religion concept that is coming. And how do you stop that other than perhaps energetically interfering with that in some way? And that would be a nice thought, to think that you could mellow out that mindset and take that out of the picture by doing numbers. I'd like to think that it may be remotely possible, but that may be the only way you could do it, short of having to eliminate each and every one of them that existed in that mindset, and that isn't probably in the cards.
Yeah. So each person has to decide to use these numbers to elevate their.
Well, I'm not too sure they have to decide, because if in fact they make a decision, and I've had many men that looked at this program and just sort of smiled, you've got to be nuts. But when they go, and if they will do the numbers, then they will say, hey, I felt that. And I've had any number of them say, just in sitting in on a session, because perhaps their wife drug them there by the ear, or however they managed to make it. But I've had many men, particularly men, change their belief system that, hey, there is some merit to this. Or all at once, I had a fellow sitting next to me in a plane when I came over for our first session over here, and he was fidgeting and his back was just killing him. And so I said, if I gave you a number, I said, it might help you. And he looked at me, and so he didn't say anything, and I didn't move to do anything. So, and of course, I've never met this man. I mean, he just happened to be in the next seat. And so in a few minutes, he gets me, he said, tell me more about this number. So I started talking about it, and then he decided he'd like to try it. So I dug out my book and dug the number out to activate the energy flow down the spinal column, because his energy flow wasn't flowing. So anyway, I gave him that number, and he read it over, and pretty soon, he said, I think that's working. And by the time we got off the plane, he was totally convinced. Do you have a card? I said, I would like to phone you. And he said, my back is not bothering me at all. He said, I would expect it to get off. So they don't have to be a believer if they'll do it. Yeah. It's very real.
I understand you're focusing now more on teaching other people to do what you do, right? Is that your next?
Well, I'm not too sure I'm teaching anybody anything. I'm acquainting them with the program. And the learning process will take place amongst those that can figure out how to use it. I'm really not trying to say, hey, you've got to duplicate me. In fact, I'm very explicit. Do not try to duplicate me, but take the information now that you've got the concept and utilize the information to be you and find out how you can utilize it. And I think we'll be a lot more successful by having a variety of me's out there rather than everybody trying to be a duplicate of me. Don't think we can duplicate anybody, but I think we can create the awareness and the understanding that allows your own imagination to go on and make it. The hardest part of what I do for anybody is develop that number and have it effective. Well, we have a whole manual of numbers that have been developed, so we have a starting point. Otherwise, this whole concept would be much more difficult without having anything to help you. But I do believe the delivery of the numbers and the understanding and all the rest of it, it can be done in many, many different varieties. There's pendulum. People can use a pendulum to identify. I happen to use a rod. Some people use kinesiology in their fingers, where they do it this way. So there's a variety of things. You can do it by holding your arm out and doing muscle tests. And these are things that are well established and understood. So I believe that by just expressing, hey, it's all energy, it's all mathematics, that is sort of but as far as I can go.
So if somebody wants to contact you, you're going to be at the expo, and I know you're going to be doing private sessions here that week as well, right? The week of the expo. But if somebody wants to contact you, you work over the phone just as well as in person, right? There's no difference over the phone?
It depends a little bit on the person and how difficult it is but I think that my work over the phone is comparable to what I do in person. One thing about the telephone, we're not limited so much in time as when you have a schedule and you have an hour and you have to have them out the door so the next people can come in. On the telephone, that isn't so much a criteria. If it takes us an hour and a half, it takes us an hour and a half. So in some ways you get better attention on the telephone.
Do you have time for appointments now? Should we give out your contact information so if someone wants to contact you?
I'm available for appointments anytime. They catch me on my California phone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to work on cell phones, and I prefer not to be phoned on a cell phone, but if that's all you have, that's fine. But land phones are generally clearer, and depending on how clear their cell phone reception is as to whether we can do it. But if I can't make out what they're saying clearly enough, then it's difficult to go ahead. Mind you, it's more important that they hear me than I hear them.
Yeah. So I'll get your phone information and we'll post that on our on this video. But so we're going to conclude this part and do the second part where you're going to do a sample session so we can show the audience what that looks like, and so we'll finish it up here. But definitely this is a presentation you don't want to miss at our expo. So buy your tickets at awakenempoweredexpo.com, and we'll see you on October 11th.
The contents of this interview, or from Awake and Empowered Expo LLC from Ethann Fox and Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution, is for informational purposes only and does not necessarily reflect the viewpoints held by these organizations or individuals. Always consult with your doctor or health professional before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, or prescription drug use. Please understand that you assume all responsibility and risk for the use or misuse of this information.